Question 1 is talking about the best variable type for storing money in a bank account. The answer for this one is a float, which is the same thing as a Boolean. Question 2 is talking about a video game and creating two variables to represent the user's health points and whether or not the game is over. The answer for this one is choice C. You would need a numeric variable to represent health points and a Boolean variable to represent game over. And that is because health points is represented by a numeric value, and Boolean means true or false, yes or no, which would represent the game being over or not over. In question 3, we have to run through a code, and your answer to question 3 should have been 57 and 7. Remember that when you go from A being 3 to A being 50, it can only hold one value at a time, so 3 goes away completely and it becomes 50. And the same thing when the value of C gets stored into the value of B. Number 4 is similar to number 2. It's asking the best variables to represent a student's work and a student's name and grade. Oh, I'm sorry, just name and grade. And then also number 5 is asking what PEMDAS stands for. So number 4 should have been choice D. A string named student name would represent their name, and a numeric variable named student grade would represent their actual grade, which would be a numeric value. The reason that S and G are not great names is because they're very vague and they don't really describe what the variable holds. And then 5, we have parentheses, exponents, multiplication, and mod, division, addition, and subtraction. Question 6 is, again, you have to follow along with the code segment. And remember that one variable can only hold one value at a time. So when y goes from being 2 to 5, 2 goes away and it becomes 5. And we get z because z is equal to 1 plus x, and we know that x is 9. So 1 plus 9 makes 10. And it would print out 10 with a space and then 5 for z and then y. Then we have number 7 and 8. These are just talking about random, and this is something that you have to get used to, is dealing with the random function. So random 1 to 3 would either print 1, 2, or 3 inclusive. Then they say random 1 to 3 plus 5. They want the smallest value that it could become and the largest value. So we can see that the smallest value would be picking the random number 1 plus 5, which would make 6. The largest value that this can make would be if the random number 3 appeared, then 3 plus 5 is 8. These are similar. We have order of operations for number 9. 10 through 12 are all about mod, which is when the number on the left is being divided by the number on the right, and you write the remainder as the answer. So number 9, when you do order of operation, should have been -9. We can see here that 3 goes into 7 twice, which makes 6, and has a remainder of 1. 4 goes into 5 once, that makes 4, and it has a remainder of 1. 5 goes into 13 twice, that makes 10, and that has a remainder of 3. 13 we're reading as 44 is greater than 5, which is true. Number 14 is a similar question to 13, and then numbers 15 and 16 are a little bit mixed of each. So 14 is false, 3 is not greater than or equal to 5. For 15, x is 3, and then y turns into x times 2, which would make 6. The next random function produces a random number. They want to know how you can change the code so that it produces a random number from 1 to 7. You would simply just change 1 to 3 to 1 to 7. All right, so 17 and 18 deal with true and false, and true or false. So let's go to the answers. 17, we can see that x is set to true, and then y is set to not x. since x is true, it would be not true, which is false. But they want you to display x, and we know that x is true, so it would just display true, regardless of what y is equal to. They just want you to display x. Number 18, x is set to true, y is set to false. Then we have z is set to x or y. We know that x is true, y is false, so that's really saying true or false. And if we remember our and or our or operators, true or false would always return true. As long as one of them is true, it returns true. So 17 is A and 18 is technically A, but it's represented as C and D. Number 19 is similar. So we have a true and false code segment that we have to run through. And then 20 is a little bit different, and we have a explanation that we have to give for why that would cause an error. So number 19, we can see that x is stored as true, y is stored as false, and then z is stored as x and y. So since x is true and y is false, it's really saying true and false, which would return false. So remember, they both have to be the same. So true and false are different, which would return false. 20 says display x, and then x is stored as hello world. This would not work because you're trying to display a variable before it's actually created. So there is no variable x to display in line 1. It's being defined in line 2, and it's being assigned hello world in line 2. So if those two lines were switched, it would work perfectly, but again, it's not going to because you're trying to actually print it before you create it, and code always goes in order. So even though it's there, the code's going to go in order and not be able to display it. And then for the last question, this is trying to think about why you need temp to switch to variables and why we need a third variable to switch to variables in general. So as we can see here, if I took away the temp, I would just be left with x is stored as 5, y is stored as 3, and then x is stored as y and y is stored as x. So if that happens, one of the variables or one of the values disappears. So x is 5, y is 3, then y is stored as x, so now x becomes 3. So now the 5 is gone. So now x is 3, and then y just turns into 3 all over again with that last line of code. So I want you to think about it like 2 cups of coffee. If I wanted to switch the containers or what's in both cups of coffee, so let's say I had a Starbucks cup and a Dunkin' cup, I wouldn't be able to just switch them unless I dumped 1 cup of coffee on the floor, which wouldn't really work out in my favor. So what I would need is another cup just to store the coffee as I'm switching. So my first step would be to take the Starbucks coffee, pour it into the empty temp cup, that extra cup. Then I can take my Dunkin' coffee and pour that into the Starbucks cup. Okay, so now my Starbucks cup has Dunkin', my middle cup has Starbucks, then I would take my middle cup and pour it into the Dunkin' cup. So that's the order. So Starbucks into here. Now the Starbucks is empty. Dunkin' into the empty Starbucks. And now that middle cup has Starbucks in it, and I would put that into Dunkin'. So that is how we switch 2 cups of coffee, and that's how you also have to switch to variables. So you always need that third variable when you're switching to variables, and often they call it temp for temporary. Hope this helped, and remember to stay after for extra help and message if you have any questions on Canvas or Remind. Good luck studying. Have a great day.